Good morning. First things first, happy Father's Day weekend. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion. And wow, as we lead into Father's Day weekend, I got to tell you something. The market's pretty interesting. We had a pretty decent sell-off yesterday. We had some pressure on the markets, but as we've seen many times before, in the final hour or so, we started to see the markets actually shift and move back up, and we find ourselves with the Dow. It was underneath 26,000, finished up above that. But S&P and the NASDAQ, they really did have that big, nice bounce back. And specifically in the NASDAQ, where it actually finished up about 0.3% in the last 45 minutes, a nice big surge in the markets. And one of the areas of the market that really was performing all day long, but specifically towards the end of the day as well, crude. When you look at the energy stocks, crude oil finishing up around 39, we had a really nice push into the XLE, finishing up 1.25%. Now we're talking about the rest of the market not really participating all that well, but there was so many different names participating. You had Holly Frontier, Valero, Marathon, Oxy, Phillips 66, a lot of names that don't get brought up enough probably by me or by anybody else. But in terms of, these are more of the beta names in the energy space. And those beta names really do move dramatically fast when we look at what's going on in the price of oil. And I'm going to talk about that for sure in just a minute here when we talk about today. But finishing up on yesterday, one of the areas of the market that has been carrying the market, it seems like each and every day, and it's done an unbelievable job, and it's not necessarily tech, but it is. Talk about the semiconductors. Now, that's a space that has been one of those leadership roles. The chip stocks, so NVIDIA, AMD, Micron, Qorvo, Skyworks, Marvell, all of those names had a little bit of pressure yesterday. So that was one of the areas that kind of pulling on the marketplace. Tech had a really late surge. You take a look at something like an Apple in the final hour where it flipped and had a nice move to the upside, couple of bucks added to it. So that was something. And yesterday on the take, we were talking about the dominance of the Chinese names in terms of seeing unusual option activity. It was absolutely extraordinary yesterday, and a lot of those names really did perform very rapidly. We had Momo, Bilibili, Huya, VIP shops. I mean, all of these up 3%, 3.5%, 2.5%, 4.5%. Really a nice move across the board in many of these names that aren't quite as familiar as JD and Baba and some of these other names that do get talked about far more. But a nice move in a lot of those names that we were seeing so much unusual option activity there. It was absolutely incredible. And that really did dominate a lot of what we were seeing yesterday in terms of the early, at least the first half of the day, in terms of unusual option activity. So we finished up the day with about a 33 VIX. Makes a lot of sense. The kind of movement that we're getting right now, that's indicating about a 2% move each and every day out of the S&P 500. When you look at the intraday moves, we are definitely getting those kind of moves. And we are seeing some pretty violent moves in very short time frames as well. So that's another aspect of this marketplace that probably doesn't get talked about enough. But the volumes, again, this is day two now, where those volumes really did drop off once again, about 8 million off of what our average is. Matter of fact, finished up about 25 million, just a little bit more than 25 million yesterday. So well off of the June average that we've been seeing. We've seen so much strength. Now, I talked about energy earlier, and I talked about oil. Oil now with the four handle in front of it. So we're talking about oil over 40. That's something that's pretty special. We hadn't seen that all that often in this year. But you look at the XLE, early on, up about 2.25%. The OIH up about 3%. And those, again, some of those other secondary, Oxy, Devon, Apache, Noble, you get the idea, all up 4% or more. So pretty strong moves. But this is a market that did start off the day with about a 300-plus point move in the Dow. That really kind of gave back some. Matter of fact, we just lifted back up a little bit more. We were down about half of that number, about 150, just a few minutes ago when we started. Now we're up about 180 points. So call it about 0.7% to the upside. The NASDAQ up about 0.8%. S&P up about 0.75%. So pretty in-line movement together today. All of those major indices, which is something that's a little bit unusual. We've been seeing where the NASDAQ either has been leading or lagging, or definitely a disconnect. But today, all three of the indices definitely moving together. So what is moving and powering us to the upside today, especially when we're up about 300 points? The industrials, names like Dow and Boeing. We continue to talk about that each and every day, that leadership role. Materials also up about 1%. Semiconductors. Now we're starting to see the positive side of the semiconductor world as well. Microchip and Applied Materials, NXPI, those kind of names all moving to the upside and sort of pulling. I'll tell you what, take a look at the SMH sometime on a chart. It's a pretty amazing chart to look at. It's a lot like when I talk about biotech as well. When you look at the SMH, which is semiconductors, when you look at that, you are going to see that it's right off of the all-time highs. And you take a look over at biotech as well, you're going to see something very, very similar. Not quite there, just a couple of points away though, but sniffing really, really, really close to some of those all-time highs. So that's something. We talk about biotech and we talk about the diversity, or at least the broadness of what we're talking in the markets themselves. It's not just 5 stocks. There is far more that's participating. Those do have huge market caps. Don't get me wrong, I fully get it. But the participation has been far more broad than I think gets talked about each and every day. And it should be talked about because we are seeing that participation. So today, unusual option activity, all kinds of different things today. So today, starting off really, really nice, all kinds of different choices. I'm going to be on the halftime report today. That's why I'm wearing a little bit more of a dressy shirt. I got the tie off to the side, so I'll be getting ready for that. But I decided I was going to use something that right out of the gate we saw this name, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I have to use other things probably when I get onto the show, so you're going to want to watch because we got a couple of unusual options at the very end of the show coming up on the halftime report. But Beyond Meat. Now, what I wanted to highlight here is this is a really interesting trade from this perspective. They are buying next week, June 26th, next week's expiring Beyond the Meat calls, okay? So these are June 26th. They're going to be expiring. Stock's trading about 161. Actually, it's moved up a little bit. It got as high as 165. Last I looked, it was trading about 162. But when it was trading 161, a little over 161, they had a buyer of these Junes that expire next Friday. They are the 215 strike calls. And they're paying about 50 to 95 cents. Now, 4,000 of these trading. What makes that so interesting is this would be a very violent move, and a move that probably would tell you that it's going back towards what have been the highs. I believe the highs were well over 200. Matter of fact, I think they were close to 230 when it hit its highs since it's been a publicly traded company. So this is a really interesting play. This is a strike way up above. It would be a little bit different if there was a little bit longer time frame, but it's not. We're talking about June 26th. So these have 1 week to work and to perform. That's going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. I am not in these calls at this time. I continue to look at it, trying to figure it out, but at this point in time, not in it, but it certainly is unusual, and it certainly stood out very early on. Always interesting to see. Guys, you want to get educated in the markets. You want to understand the derivatives markets. You'll understand why this one makes me a little bit apprehensive right now. If you have the education to understand all the different reasons why this one is a little bit more complicated and trying to figure out whether or not this is a possibility in this short time frame. So all of those components come together, and a lot of that you just need to be educated. You have to be educated. The Market Rebellion crew, they're going to get you done. They are the best in the industry. Folks, have a great day of trading. I'll see you on the halftime report, and I'm on the 5 o'clock tonight as well. CNBC Fast Money. So we'll see you at noon and 5. Have a great day.